Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Truth. I'm your host, the one you love the most, Niall Hassan, back with a brand new episode here in The Truth. Back once again with my boy AJ Ponciano. AJ, how are you doing here today?
I'm doing good. How about yourself now?
Doing great as well. We recently just recorded our Thursday night special, and today we're going to be giving you guys our starts, sits, sleepers, and busts for week 10. Hopefully, you guys have been tuning in the last 9 weeks, so we don't really need to explain it further, but it's also pretty self explanatory. We got 3 starts, sits, sleepers, and busts each. So why don't you go ahead and kick things away with your 3 must starts for week 10?
Yeah, so my first one, I'm going to go with Drake London with the trade of Marshawn Lattimore going to the Commanders and just all the injuries that have been accumulating right now for the DB room for the Saints. I think Drake London could have a really big game, a divisional game here. Granted, last time they played, only 6 receptions, 64 yards, but he did have 12 targets in that game. Like I said, no Marshawn there, who's been one of the best DBs this year. I just expect Drake London in a divisional game to really bounce back against the Saints and have a good game here. I think he'll have a good game. Saints defense also hasn't been that good. Granted, not a lot of touchdowns, only 8 touchdowns, but they have allowed the third most passing yards with almost 2,300 at this point. So yeah, I think Drake London there, just divisional game, just will match up for him. Next up, I'm going to go with Jared Goff. Goff's been great these last few weeks. He has the highest completion percentage right now in the entire NFL at 74.9. I want to say it's something like since the Seattle game where he was a perfect 18 for 18. His pass completion percentage is close to like 84% or 85%. It's just really weird. Like you just never really see that. And this team has been really good these last couple of weeks. Now they go up against the Texans defense, who's been all right this year through the air. I mean, they've had their struggles for sure. But I think one of the big things is allowing 19 pass touchdowns. That's where the biggest struggle is. Only 1,700 yards, which is on the lower end right now. But big thing, 19 pass touchdowns, and Goff has been accurate. And if he's able to just go down the field, get 2, 3 touchdowns in this game, I wouldn't be too surprised if they did that, especially on a Sunday night game. The Lions being one of those teams that is looking to go to the Super Bowl. This is one of those things that to really put their name on the map because I feel like they haven't been underrated, but they haven't been talked about as much just because they go out, they win games, and then no one really talks about them. They talk about them a little bit, but it's not really that much. And lastly, I'm going to go Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is going against Jacksonville, who is the second worst pass defense now in the NFL, allowing just over 2,500 yards, 19 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. I mean, I think this could be a big game. I know Addison's been posting stuff on his Instagram stories about like free three. It was just his number three. He's been pretty upset about his work share there. But I mean, you have Jay Jettas, like I said, Sam Darnold. He's been good essentially all year. 17 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, just right at 1,900 yards. He has thrown a couple more interceptions these last couple weeks. Last week having 2 against Indy, but I mean, this Jaguars team everyone's been able to throw against them, and no one turns the ball over. Like I said, 19 pass touchdowns, which is tied for the second most, and they've given up the uh, second most yards, and they have the worst touchdown to interception ratio on the defensive side. So yeah, with the wide receivers, with the weapons, I'm predicting also a Jordan Addison breakout game here because I assume they want to keep him healthy. He had a really good rookie year, having 900 yards, and just kind of had a slow start here. So this is the start for him to really do it against a really bad pass defense.
For the record, Jordan Addison should be thankful that he still has a job in Minnesota because he's had 2 off the field stuff in the 2 years that he's been as a Viking. And it's funny that he said that and then he had a really good game last week. So we'll see if that continues. But for my first start, it's going to be Derek Carr. Now, why am I picking Derek Carr? Well, because the Saints fired Dennis Allen, okay? And every time, okay, I'm telling you, bro, the NFL scripted. Every time, I could be wrong about this, every time a coach gets fired, a major change happens, the team for some reason just plays tremendously good the next game. I think that's going to happen for the Saints for a variety of reasons. One, because of that. Two, because they've lost 7 games in a row. And three, because Derek Carr is trying to like kind of break through the ceiling and say, hey, I'm still here. So I really think Derek Carr is going to have a big game. I don't know how as much fantasy value. I think he's still 21, 22 fantasy points just because he's not going to give you very much rushing value, if any. It's really going to be through the air. I think he gets this first game over 300 yards. I think he gets 3 touchdowns on the day and 0 interceptions. Has a really good game. On top of that, they're playing the Falcons, as you had mentioned earlier, and the Falcons are a good defense overall, but the Falcons at times, this is a division matchup. Sometimes these go into shootouts, and I think Derek Carr can really manipulate that passing attack, or the pass defense, I should say, and really have a very efficient passing attack. But it's a long shot. He's rostered in 13% of leagues. If you want a hit or miss guy, he's probably available in those deeper leagues or teams that are kind of struggling to find a quarterback and a reliable option to use consistently. Sticking with quarterbacks for my second guy, it's going to be Cooper Rush. Yes, Dak Prescott. It was rumored that he was out for a couple of weeks. It looks like he's going to be out for 4 weeks. I actually saw the alert before I went on the air here, and I don't remember the exact term, but it was some fascia, something with his hamstring. Okay, I think he's out for the next 4 games. So now it's next man up. Is it Cooper Rush, Trey Lance? Maybe we'll see the revolvence of Trey Lance's career, but for now it's Cooper Rush. I do think the Cowboys should go with Trey Lance. One of my Cowboys friends that I know I was talking to, jokingly, I said, hey, I have Trey Lance in my dynasty league. Why don't we use him? He goes, why don't we just use Trey Lance so we can unintentionally but intentionally lose games and get a really good draft pick? I go, hey, fitting. He definitely is going to get you a lot of touchdowns, but he's also going to get you a lot of interceptions. Cooper Rush, he obviously has to be better than Trey Lance because Cooper Rush has consistently been the backup for this Dallas Cowboys team. On top of that, this is a Dallas Cowboys team that's struggling as well. I think they're 3-5. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure they're 3-5 off the top of my head. Have not had a good season, right? Dak signs this big deal. They haven't had a good season. I think Cooper Rush could maybe be, again, a similar thing where he kind of has a breakout game similarly to Derek Carr based on the fact that, this is Cooper Rush and the Dallas Cowboys, at least for now. They are going against Philadelphia, which Philadelphia's defense, I think, has stagnated at times. So this could open up the door for possibilities. But again, I think Cooper Rush is 17, 18 fantasy points. And for a guy that's rostered in 1% of leagues, I think this is an absolute win. And finally, the final must start, I'm going to go with Davante Adams. Obviously had his breakout game that everyone was waiting for, had it in week 2, but particularly with the Jets. Really, for week 1, 6 points, a 9.4, 22.1, had a kind of garbage time touchdown, not a garbage time touchdown, but blown coverage on defense. Was watching that game, a big time touchdown, but 7 catches, 91 yards, and 1 touchdown. Jets won. Are they going to make a run to the playoffs? Probably not, but at least Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers are back in that connection and having success. I think Davante Adams was a must-start regardless, but he's even more a must-start now, just the fact that I think a lot of people were skeptical based on the recent games with the Jets. But you got to remember, those 2 games are on the road, and they are going to the road to Arizona, but Arizona is a far easier place to play than outdoors in a primetime game at Pittsburgh, and then outdoors in Foxborough, regardless of how bad the Patriots are. So this is a perfect opportunity for Davante Adams to get another touchdown, 7, 9 receptions, maybe even 2. But I think he definitely is a must start, and a lot of people should consider starting him, even if they're a little bit scared of his ability to play on the road. Let's just remember his best week of the season, week 2 at Baltimore, one of the toughest places to play, dropped 26 fantasy points. So that should be the least of your guys' concerns. What about sits?
George Pickens is going to be the first guy I'm going to say that you should sit. He's been solid these last couple of weeks. Actually, pretty good. 2 weeks ago, 5 receptions, 111 yards, a touchdown. Last week, 4 receptions, 74 yards. No touchdown there. One of the big things going against the Commanders, as I mentioned earlier in the show, they went out and traded for Marshon Lattimore. Lattimore has been one of the least targeted cornerbacks for the Saints so far this season, now over at the Commanders. And he has, I believe it's only 1 passing touchdown he's allowed all season, and maybe 0. I don't completely remember. But he also hasn't had a wide receiver go over 70 yards, I think 60 yards in a game against them this season. I mean, he's been really good. Granted, he is coming off an injury, and I'm not 100% sure if he's going to play. But either way, this DB room for the Commanders has been solid. They've completely turned around from last year, allowing just around 1,800 yards through the air, which is right around 10th best in the NFL. They have allowed 14 passing touchdowns through only 3 receptions, so not a great ratio there. But I don't expect the Steelers to do a whole lot. I mean, they've been solid, but one of the things about the Steelers is that they don't go out and put up all these huge numbers all the time. They go out, they get their lead, they run the ball, they chew clock, and then they play good defense once they take off like 4 to 6 minutes off the clock. I mean, that's just kind of one of those things that Pickens, it's very hit or miss. And I think this game where playing one of the better defense, especially if Marshawn does play, he won't have the best game. Next up, Cortland Sutton. Cortland Sutton, it's been very hit or miss this year, and it's basically just kind of off of Bo Nix. Going into Kansas City playing the Chiefs divisional game there, it's really 50-50. Either Nix is going to have a really good game or a really bad game. or mediocre game. That's kind of what we've seen out of him all year. And Colin said he's had a good role here, but this DB room for KC has been solid as well. They rank just two more spots ahead of the Commanders, allowing 1,743 yards. One of the big things, 5 interceptions to 11 touchdowns. So it's been very hit or miss. And this is, I believe, the first time that they'll be playing each other this year. If I remember correctly, they have not played Kansas City yet. So who knows? I mean, Bo Nix, rookie quarterback, going to Kansas City, super tough environment, in a game where the Chiefs are 9-0 now. They're looking for that, or 8-0, 9-0. They're looking for that undefeated record at home. I mean, it's one of those things that Mahomes just dominates that division, especially at home. I think he only has like 1 or 2 losses this year against teams like that. And then Caleb Williams is going to be my last guy. Caleb Williams had his very slow start. We all saw it. And then really picked it up and then kind of back to that slow start where it's just been back and forth. Going up against the Patriots defense, who isn't the best. I mean, obviously they aren't good, but it's also the Patriots defense. You can never count them out at times. That's kind of one of the things they always pride themselves on. A little bit over 2,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. But Caleb Williams, like I said, it's been very spotty. Those first 2-3 weeks, not the best, and then he went on like a good 3-week stretch where he threw for 7 touchdowns, 1 interception. And his last 2 weeks against Washington, Arizona, and combined between those, he has 348 yards, no passing touchdowns, and no interceptions. And then Caleb Williams, I mean, he's not going to offer you too much on the rushing side, so he's not going to go out and be like Jay Daniels, where he has a bad passing game and he's going to be able to make it up on the ground. So I'm going to pass on him, especially I believe this game is it is in Chicago. I thought it was in Massachusetts off the Patriots, but either way, I mean, that defense has been all right. I mean, that's what the Patriots pride themselves on, is the defense every year. And Caleb Williams, he's back to that little cold stretch. I think he'll be in a cold stretch this week, and then next week he'll break through because a lot of people are going to start counting him out.
Yeah, so I'll just stick with Caleb Williams here. I'm very quarterback heavy, it seems like, in these shows consistently, but quarterbacks are just so hit or miss at times. Caleb Williams is one of my sits this week. As you mentioned, 2 rough games on the road at Arizona and at Washington. Does return home, but the Patriots defense is still a defense that does compete at a decently high level for the situation that they're in. Drake May, obviously not on the defensive side, but a really great passer at the end of regulation against Tennessee. There is a little bit of momentum moving forward for the Patriots, but the Patriots also just have a bunch of complexing blitzes, complexing styles that can make a young quarterback like Caleb Williams confused. They did a really good job of containing Jaden Daniels, so maybe that can continue. But looking at this matchup here for Caleb Williams, I think it is going to be difficult. They do kick off their 3-game homestand: New England, Green Bay, and Minnesota. I just think Caleb Williams has been a little bit too spotty throughout the year, but particularly the last 2 games. I feel like if you're going to start Caleb Williams, it has to be after a good week, kind of like in weeks 5 and 6, where he had a good week against Carolina and then a good week against Jacksonville before that bye. So definitely would avoid him. Sticking with quarterbacks, I'm going to avoid with Baker Mayfield. If you were to tell me that Baker Mayfield would be the second position-ranked quarterback in Week 10, I would say you're insane. But that's what happens when you have 5 straight weeks of 22-plus fantasy points. Last week, 18 fantasy points. And during those 3 games before last week, it reminded me a lot of Geno Smith. 325-plus yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, but got it done, was able to get the yards, able to get the touchdowns. It's been interesting, too, especially the last 2 weeks without guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I believe Mike Evans is out one more game. I could be wrong about that. They also have a bye week the following week, so that could influence his ability to come back. They are at home, but they are facing San Francisco, and San Francisco is coming off a bye. San Francisco defense is a nightmare defense, regardless of who's playing, who's in positions, things like that. Definitely not a fun situation. I think this could be one of the weeks that he has a little bit of a cold week. But again, I feel like at times I've been a little bit of Baker Mayfield hater, and it ended up proving me to bite me in the ass. So I think, maybe that continues this matchup against San Francisco, where he's definitely limited as far as success. And finally, sticking with quarterbacks, I'm going to go with Joe Flacco. I watched that game against Minnesota firsthand. Obviously not a good game for Joe Flacco. Doesn't get any easier as he comes home to face Buffalo, who again has got a stifling defense as well. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Joe Flacco had that one good game against Jacksonville, where I believe it was his first start with Anthony Richardson being injured. I think Richardson got hurt in week 4 there against Pittsburgh, had that first start, and ever since then has continued to go down on the downwards path. I think that's going to continue this week against Buffalo. He obviously can't get much worse than 3 fantasy points, but I think he'll be less than 8, less than 7. Be more of a game manager. On top of that, the Colts really struggle with the run game against Minnesota. I think there's going to be a heavy emphasis to get Jonathan Taylor and those running backs evolved and really materialized before they even try to attempt passing with guys like Pittman who've been banged up, Josh Downs who've had a good year. All in all, definitely avoiding Joe Flacco. That reign has come to an end, unfortunately, sooner than last year with Cleveland. Okay, what about sleepers?
First one, I'm going to Tyron Tracy, rookie this year, running back for the Giants. He's been really good when he gets his touches. The first 4 weeks he was injured, so you can't really look at that. But the next 2 weeks after that, 18 carries, 120 yards, 129 yards, 17 carries, 50 yards, a touchdown. He also got injured in that game, if I remember correctly. Came back against Philly that next week, 6 carries, only 23 yards. I know he definitely got injured in that game and did not complete the game because I was watching that one. In his last 2 weeks, 20 carries for 145 yards, a touchdown, and last week 16 carries for 66 yards with one reception for 3 yards. He's going against a horrible run defense with the Panthers this week. He's giving up 4.6 yards per carry, a little bit over 1,400 yards, and 15 rushing touchdowns they've given up this year. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a game where we see Tracy get 20 plus carries. You see him get to that 150 yard mark that we've seen him get close to, and at least a touchdown, probably 2. I mean, I get it. The Giants, they suck, but Tyron Tracy's been a bright spot for this team. And like I said, they are going up against the worst run defense in the entire NFL right now against the Panthers. I just expect him if he's going to be getting those carries like how we've seen, he should have that same type of production. Next up, I'm going to go to that tight end spot with Taysom Hill, and he's finally healthy. He was healthy early on in the year, and he was injured for a couple weeks, I believe, with a rib injury and then something else. But they love getting him the ball. I don't know exactly how it's going to go with this special teams coach, Dan Rizzi, how much he's gonna have him really be in the offense. But Clint Kubiak's been loving using him. When he has been on the field, he's been getting 5 carries roughly, right around like 20, 30 yards. But then he's also getting right around like 2, 3 receptions. You've seen him get rushing touchdowns. I believe he has 3 rushing touchdowns on the year. It seems like whenever they get within 7 yards roughly, it just seems like they give the ball to Taysom Hill. They're like, hey, you can either throw for 1 or you can rush for 1 2 straight times, and then they go for a pass. Also, one of the things I believe you mentioned earlier in the show, firing Dennis Allen. It seems like offenses kind of go crazy after their head coach gets fired. And it wasn't like they fired their offensive coordinator, who was the head coach. It was the defensive coordinator and the head coach. It's still Clint Kubiak. It's still the same offense they'll be running. They're just playing under a new head coach there. So I expect that same type of trend to keep going here. And last one, I'm going to go Cade Otton. Cade Otton has really proved me wrong. I believe you're a bigger Cade Otton fan than me coming into this year. And even last year, I was back and forth just because I haven't seen the production, but we've seen it these last couple weeks with Mike Evans, who I'm also presuming is going to be out this week. Obviously, Godwin out for the entire year. But since those injuries, if you look at from that Baltimore game to Atlanta to Kansas City, these past couple weeks, he's had 8, 9, and 8 receptions on 10, 10, and 11 targets. Minimum 77 yards, went 181 and 77, and 3 touchdowns with that time also. I mean, he's getting targets. He's really the only reliable weapon that they have through the air outside of the running backs. Going against the 49ers defense, who has been good this year. I mean, it's the 49ers defense. They're good essentially every year. I expect that trend to keep happening. I expect the game script to have him be playing from behind a good amount, having to throw a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a game where we see on go 88 yards, 90 yards, a touchdown on 8, 9 receptions. It just seems like they're going to have to force feed him the ball to get to going down the field. One of the things I also really like with Cade Otton that I noticed when he took over as a main weapon, he doesn't use gloves. He uses bare hands and tape on his fingers. I love seeing that out of a tight end that's like old throwback tight end, like that we've seen from like Dallas Clark with the Colts a long time ago. I just love seeing tight ends that don't wear gloves like that and just kind of go up and get everything.
Dallas Clark, man, Iowa legend. Love the mention there. Yeah, so for my first sleeper, I'm gonna go with Xavier Leggett. I have him in my dynasty league and it's been kind of holding on to him, kind of a freak talent. Reminds me a lot of DK Metcalf in that aspect. The last 2 weeks, been able to get in the end zone. 13 and a half fantasy points each week, 4 catches, 33 yards, and a touchdown. Just a typical stat line, it seems like. But he's also got this weird celebration. I don't even know what it's called that he does after he scores a touchdown. Him and his teammates. It was kind of funny
It,
to watch. What is it called? Do you know? I know what it's called. I just
it's
can't.
called. I forgot what it's called, but the where it came from is when he went and visited a hospital. He was dressed up in a cowboy suit, and they gave him like one of those cowboy horses, and like the
Yeah.
like name tag on it was Cash because of the way he pronounces Cash with his
Mm.
accent. So like it's the Cash something, but yeah, that's what it is. It's the horse that he was given because of his Halloween costume when he visited a hospital.
And that's funny, but he's got a killer celebration. He's had a pretty decent year for the situation he's in, being a rookie, being in Carolina with the quarterback issues. Has 4 touchdowns already on the year, and a guy that's been trending upward. Yeah, he's had some spotty times, but this could be a reliable option, especially against a Giants team that's obviously been struggling this season. He is a sleeper for that reason, but I think with those two 13-point performances, he definitely is a guy that you can get more consideration. On top of the fact that Deontay Johnson is no longer there, don't know off the top of my head if Adam Thielen's going to be back. I know he missed last week. There was some hope that he could be activated soon, but if not, he's definitely going to be in that good position. And also, I believe Jonathan Mingo was on the Panthers, correct? Now he's on the Cowboys. He got traded there as
Yes.
well. So a lot of opportunities for Xavier Leggett to get in the mix and have success, particularly as maybe a sleeper option, maybe develop as a wide receiver too, depending on who's available for Carolina. Secondly, I'm also going to stick with wide receivers and I'm going to go with Cortland Sutton. I believe he was one of your sits. He's had a better year than people expect, including myself. 22nd position ranked wide receiver, which is a wide receiver two. Rostered in 82.6% of leagues. Had his best game last week, 23 fantasy points, 7 for 112. I believe he also had a passing touchdown the day as well. And he also threw a pass in the game before that with 17 fantasy points. But again, trending upward, a big part of that is Bo Nix kind of trending upward as well. They're going into a difficult situation in Kansas City, but Kansas City's defense has shown some flaws. It showed some flaws last week against Baker Mayfield in that pass heavy offense. Going to be difficult for Bo Nix, don't get me wrong, but I think Bo Nix could look to a guy like Cortland Sutton as a reliable option and a guy that really has been kind of sleeping. He probably sitting on one of your bench spots that could easily be a flex or a wide receiver two option. He's got the stats to prove that he's a wide receiver two option at least. And finally, I'm going to go with Herbert the Pervert, my guy. Justin Herbert slowly starting to pick things up. Obviously, New Orleans was his big game, 24 points. Last week, 19 and a half. All in all, they're just passing a lot more, which is not a Greg Roman or Jim Harbaugh style offense, but they've really been doing a good job of passing. I don't know if that has any contributions to the fact that Gus Edwards is on IR, but guys like Ladd McConkey, well, I would say guys like Quentin Johnson, but he's so hit or miss as well. Regardless, they're really doing a good job of opening up that offense and passing. And Justin Herbert's one of the best passers. There was a time a couple of years ago, and even last year for that matter, where Justin Herbert was a consistent top five, top seven fantasy quarterback. Strictly the fact that he would have 300 plus yards every game, kind of like Baker Mayfield's been doing. Obviously, went away when the Chargers kind of ventured to be more of a running team, but I think that could be back, particularly for the Chargers in this matchup here, which excites me going at home to face Tennessee, who obviously has been struggling. So he's a guy that I think could be a great waiver wire ad, especially for those that need a quarterback, being rostered in 46% of leagues. Okay, and then what about Bus?
I'm gonna go CMC. I don't know if he really plays this week. Again, it could be smoke screens. They did open the 3 week or 3 week window for him to come back to practice and be able to come to games. But I think people are overhyping it. I get it. CMC's coming back potentially, but if he doesn't come back from these next 3 weeks to game time, he's out for the entire year. So I get it. That means they're confident he can come back. But it's two Achilles injuries. Like both Achilles are injured. I mean, I don't understand the reason to push him through this. You just gave him a contract extension. I get it. He wants to be out there. You guys want to be winning games, but it's one of those things. If one of those gets re-injured this game, it's probably career-ending injury. I mean, we were both thinking it's career-ending injury either way, with both Achilles being messed up there. But if he's ready to go, I still wouldn't play him. I think Jordan Mason did log a full practice already this week from when we're recording this. So there's a good chance that he will be 100% healthy to go for this week. I think CMC will be on a snap count. I would be surprised if he's gets the ball between receptions and rushing 15 times. I wouldn't be surprised if they keep him right at that number. Right around 11, 12 rush attempts, maybe 3 receptions. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the type of game, or that's how many touches that CMC gets. Because you got to ease him back into it. I get it. He's been practicing on the side, not with the team, but game day is completely different. It is a different monster. You cannot just be like, oh yeah, CMC. I get it. He's one of the top. He's the top running back in the NFL, but you can't just throw a guy back in there mid-season after he hasn't been able to have full practices all year up to this point. Again, but also going against a pretty good Buccaneers run defense. They're right around the middle of the pack, just under 1,200 total rushing yards, which is pretty solid for a team that's had dealing with injuries on the defensive side of the ball, and only five rushing touchdowns up to this point, so solid there. Next up, I'm gonna go with Quentin Johnston. Uh, I just don't trust him. I get it. He had a huge week last week, 4 receptions, 1 touchdown, 118 yards. But if you look at the numbers, he just doubled his yards essentially in this game. Like, you can't just go out and pick him up and expect him to do the exact same thing like that again. The Chargers are going to be playing as the Titans, which surprisingly has been good defensively. They don't allow many yards. At this point, the Titans have rushing or receiving. They've been pretty solid. Right now, they've given up the least amount of passing yards in the NFL, just under 1,400. They have allowed 12 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, so that isn't the best ratio there. But like I said, he's doubled his yards. I mean, most yards he's had this season. Outside of that, you have to go back to week 2 against Carolina, where he had 5 receptions for 51 yards and 2 touchdowns. That week and this past week are his only 2 productive games all season. Plus, he's been dealing with injuries his entire career. I get it; they're throwing you a little bit more, but with that, I just don't trust Quentin Johnson. He hasn't shown that he's been able to consistently do this back-to-back weeks. He hasn't shown it this year. If I remember correctly, he had 2 good weeks at one point last year, but outside of that, I just haven't seen it, and I wouldn't be surprised if this offense switches up and they start running the ball a lot more again. Like, it's been one of those things that, like, everyone realized, all right, they're just running the ball, and they're like, all right, let's go 3 weeks. Let's just throw the ball, have Herbert throw for 300 yards, and then go right back to the run game. I wouldn't be surprised. Like you said, that isn't the type of style that Hardball runs his offense. That's not the style that, I forgot the offensive coordinator, you said his name, runs his offense.
Greg Roman.
And then Greg Roman. And then lastly, Terry McLaurin. I love Terry McLaurin. I think I've said it for the last 2 years. He's the most underrated wide receiver, and we get to see why he's so good. Now having Jane Daniels there. On the year, 600 yards, 6 touchdowns on 42 receptions. He's been good. But this Steelers defense, the Steelers defense is kind of like the Patriots. They just hang their hat on how good their defense can be. The Steelers have been pretty solid this year as well on the passing side. Not allowing too many yards, not allowing too many touchdowns. And they get their lead, they go out, play good defense, and then they run clock. Jane Daniels has been really good this year, and I think that he'll be able to find McLaurin. But one of the things with McLaurin, he's been kind of hit or miss also. Not as bad as Quentin Johnston. It will a lot more 100-yard games for McLaurin, but he's had those weeks with 125 yards, 98, 112, 100. But he's also had weeks like we saw last week, 2 receptions, 19 yards. Granted, he did make up with that game having 2 touchdowns, so it did save you there. But if you go to other games, earlier this year, 2 receptions, 17 yards, 6 receptions, 22 yards. It seems like the games that he does have a little bit less yards, he has been able to make it up fantasy-wise as getting a receiving touchdown. But like I said, the Steelers pride themselves on their defense. I don't think this is going to be a really high-scoring game between these two because both defenses have been solid all year. The Steelers have given up 8 passing touchdowns to 10 interceptions. A great ratio. If you have more interceptions than passing touchdowns allowed, that's great. They've also allowed just over 1,900 passing yards, which is right there in the middle of the pack as well. I just don't see this being a really high-scoring game. Like I said, this could be a game where it's 17-20 or 13-17 could be the final score.
So my 3 busts, first is going to be Jordan Addison. We mentioned earlier about Jordan Addison. Obviously, kind of seems like he doesn't really like being in Minnesota. I don't blame him. Obviously, last week his best or second best game of the year. He had 5 catches for 42 yards and a touchdown. I feel like that was a bit misleading as well. Sam Darnold obviously very spotty last week against Indianapolis. Just a very bad Sunday night game in general. That was very painful to watch. He's been doing a little bit of an injury all year. I believe it was his ankle, if I can remember correctly. But weeks 2 and 3 did not play, but he's kind of been nagging with that throughout. On top of that, TJ Hawkinson came back last week. They were kind of easing him into the offense. He was kind of easing himself back into getting, hit in full contact and things like that. So I think that's partially why he didn't have as much success, and that's why Darnold was looking to a guy like Addison. Going on the road against Jacksonville, I think this could be the first game that Jordan Addison kind of steps aside and TJ Hawkinson really emerges himself back as that number 2 option at the wide receiver position, even though he's a tight end. Or I should say the number 2 target for Sam Darnold. Basically, I think Jordan Addison will go back to his maybe 5-6 fantasy points a week. Secondly, I'm going to go with Russell Wilson. Okay, now Russell Wilson, first game against the Jets had 24.8 fantasy points. Last week, 13.8. So kind of trending down a little bit. I mean, a big part of why he had 24 was the fact that he had a rushing touchdown. He would have had 18, but still didn't look tremendous. I mean, I feel like, he looked fine against the Giants, but he kind of seems more of a budget quarterback. On top of that, I think this is one of those times where Russell Wilson's going to eventually fall off a cliff and not be very successful. I think this could be a potential for that. I think this could be a game, kind of like a trap game for the Steelers, and I would love to see it too, because also I think this could create a quarterback controversy between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and just not liking the Steelers could lead to some more confusion there. But I think this is a game where Russell Wilson has a couple of interceptions, and I think the Steelers really kind of reevaluate where they're at the quarterback position as they try to progress to obviously the playoffs and to win a Super Bowl. And then finally, we go with Raheem Mostert. Obviously, Devon Achane's the big guy. I feel like they've been trying to take away his carries, but he's just so explosive and so great out of the backfield. Raheem's fine as well. He's just so misleading. I mean, 9 rushes for 19 yards and 2 touchdowns in week 8, 16 fantasy points. Last week, 10 for 56, 2 catches, 32 yards. I just don't trust him, especially going into Los Angeles, take on the Rams. They have a good run defense, and I really think this could be a big game for Achane and other running backs on that roster as opposed to Raheem Mostert. All in all, I think I'm just a little bit sour about Raheem Mostert, and I just don't see Raheem Mostert having any type of success that Achane's had or any other running backs on that team's had for that matter. And I think Raheem Mostert, again, just too spotty to really consistently start week in and week out. Thank you guys for listening to another episode here on The Truth. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure you follow The Truth on Twitter at TheTruthAsOne to stay up to date with the latest information regarding The Truth, including podcast dates, podcast uploads, and other important information you don't want to miss. Make sure you guys also follow The Truth on Instagram and TikTok at the.tt.truth. Are you looking to find a drink that offers peak hydration, raises your energy levels, speeds up your recovery, and keeps your mind sharp to focus on memory? Look no further than Acid Rainwater. I'm excited to partner with Bloodline Sports, AZ, and Acid Rainwater, which focuses on peak hydration and productivity, while also maintaining ecosystem-friendly product. Use code HESSON15, that's HESSON15 for 15% off every purchase. As always, I'm your host, the one you love the most, Niall Hesson, joined once again by AJ Ponciano. Take care and good night.